Go back to your country. We don't need people like you here." Glenn Hartley said it loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. 3 guests at the front desk turned to look. A family with children stopped mid-step. Marisol Echevarria stood in her housekeeping uniform, spray bottle in one hand, rag in the other. 67 years old, gray hair pulled back. The name tag on her chest said María Santos. "I was just cleaning the window," she said quietly. "You asked me to clean the windows." "I asked you to be invisible." Glenn stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to seem professional, while every word dripped with contempt. "When guests are in the lobby, you disappear. You don't exist. Is that too complicated for your little immigrant brain?" A woman at the front desk looked uncomfortable. Her husband pulled out his phone. Recording. Glenn didn't notice. Or didn't care.
5 days, Glenn continued. 5 days I've been trying to train you, and you still can't understand basic instructions. Maybe the problem is your English, or maybe the problem is that they let anyone across the border these days. Marisol said nothing. Her hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't change. 47 years in this country. 47 years since she'd arrived on a boat from Marielle, with nothing but the clothes on her back. Now she owned 18 hotels, this one included. But Glenn Hartley didn't know that. "Get out of my sight," Glenn snapped. "Go clean toilets. That's more your speed." Marisol picked up her supplies and walked towards the service elevator. She didn't look back. But she did make a mental note. Day 5. Tomorrow, this ends.
5 days earlier, Marisol Echevarria had walked into the Harbor Inn wearing clothes she hadn't worn in 30 years. Plain black pants, white polo shirt, comfortable shoes with rubber soles, the uniform of a housekeeping trainee. Her son, Tomas, had tried to talk her out of it. "Mama, this is crazy." He paced her office like a caged animal. "You're 67 years old. You're the founder of this company. You can't just pretend to be a maid." "I was a maid, Tomas, for 12 years. It's not pretending." That was 40 years ago. And I still remember every minute. She'd looked at the reports on her desk. Complaints from the Harbor Inn, high turnover, employees leaving without notice, anonymous letters about the manager. Something is wrong at that hotel. The numbers don't lie.
So send an investigator, send HR, send anyone except yourself. Investigators see what managers want them to see. Marisol had stood, smoothing her jacket. I need to see what the workers see, the ones who are afraid to talk. Tomas had given up arguing. He knew that look. So here she was, María Santos, age 67, recent immigrant, no work history in the United States, desperate for any job she could get. The HR manager, Dana Prescott, had barely looked at her application. "You understand this is entry level," Dana said, not looking up from her computer. "Minimum wage, no benefits for 90 days, if you last that long." "I understand. Most people your age don't last a week. The work is physical." Dana finally glanced up. "Why do you even want this job?" "I need to work. My husband died. I have nothing." Dana shrugged. "Fine, start tomorrow, 6 a.m.
The housekeeping department started each day in a basement room that smelled like industrial bleach and broken dreams. 23 women sat on plastic chairs, waiting for assignments. Most were Latina. A few were black. One was white, and she sat apart from the others. Marisol took a seat in the back corner. She watched. She listened. At exactly 6:15, the door banged open. Glenn Hartley walked in like he owned the place. Technically, he managed it, but the way he moved, the way he looked at the women in that room, suggested something darker. "Good morning, ladies." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I see we have a new face today. Stand up." Marisol stood. "Name?" "María Santos." Glenn walked toward her slowly, looking her up and down.
María Santos. How old are you, Maria?
67. Someone in the front row whispered something. Glenn silenced them with a look.
67. He said it like a disease. And you think you can keep up with women half your age. You think you can clean 15 rooms a day without slowing everyone else down. I can work. We'll see about that. Glenn turned to a young woman near the front. Yolanda, she's your problem. Train her. If she can't cut it by Friday, she's gone. Yolanda Fonseca, 29, stood up. She had kind eyes and tired shoulders. Yes, Mr. Hartley. The rest of you, assignments are on the board. Get moving. I want all rooms done by 2. No excuses. He checked his watch. What are you waiting for? Go. The women scattered.
Yolanda approached Marisol with a small smile. Don't worry about him. He's like that with everyone. She extended her hand. I'm Yolanda. I'll show you the ropes. Thank you. Marisol shook her hand. I'm a fast learner. You'll need to be. By the end of her first day, Marisol understood why the turnover was so high. 15 rooms, 8 hours, every bed stripped and remade with military precision, every bathroom scrubbed until the chrome reflected your face, every carpet vacuumed in perfect lines. Her back ached, her knees screamed, her hands were raw from chemicals that probably weren't diluted properly. She sat in the break room at 3 p.m., eating a sandwich she'd brought from home. The other women filtered in and out, grabbing coffee, stealing 5 minutes of rest before the evening shift demanded more.
Yolanda sat down across from her. You did good today. She sounded surprised. Most new people quit by lunch. I've done this work before, long time ago. In Mexico? Marisol hesitated. Yes, in Mexico. Mr. Hartley was watching you. Yolanda lowered her voice. He does that with new people. Looks for weakness. If he finds it, he uses it. Uses it how? Yolanda glanced toward the door. Just do your work. Keep your head down. Don't give him a reason to notice you. And if he notices anyway? The younger woman didn't answer. She just stood, collecting her things. Same time tomorrow, Maria. Get some rest. Day 2 is always harder. Marisol watched her go.
That night, she didn't go home to her penthouse apartment overlooking the harbor. She went to a small motel 3 miles away, the kind of place that rented by the week to people who couldn't afford better. She sat on the thin mattress and wrote notes in a small journal. Names, observations, questions. The company she'd built was rotting from the inside, and Glenn Hartley was the infection. Day 2 started with a scream. Not a real scream, just Glenn Hartley's voice, which had the same effect. Room 412 had a complaint. The morning meeting went silent. Glenn held up his phone, showing a photo of a bathroom mirror with a single streak on the glass. Who cleaned 412 yesterday?
A small woman in the front row raised her hand. Rosa, maybe 50, had worked at the hotel for 6 years. I did, Mr. Hartley, but I checked that mirror 3 times. It was dirty. The guest complained. That reflects on me, on this hotel. Glenn walked toward her. You know what happens when guests complain, Rosa? I'm sorry, Mr. Hartley. It won't. $20 deduction from your tips for the week. Learn to do your job right. Rosa's face crumbled, but she nodded. What choice did she have? Marisol filed this away. Tip deductions. She'd seen nothing about that in the employee handbook, because it wasn't legal. After the meeting, Yolanda pulled her aside. He does that every week, she whispered. Find some excuse to dock someone's tips. Last month it was me. A guest said I didn't smile enough.
Where does the money go? Where do you think? Yolanda looked around, making sure they were alone. He pockets it, calls it a performance fund. We all know there's no fund. That afternoon, a guest in room 308 left a $20 bill on the pillow, a tip for housekeeping. Marisol was about to put it in her apron when Glenn appeared in the doorway. I'll take that. He plucked the bill from her fingers. New employees don't get tips until they're off probation. I wasn't told. Now you're told. He pocketed the 20 and walked away. Marisol added another line to her journal.
theft. Direct. 47 years ago, Marisol Echeverria had been 20 years old and certain she was going to die. The boat was too small. 30 people crammed into a vessel meant for 10. The waves were too big, the sun was too hot, and Cuba was disappearing behind them, getting smaller with every passing hour. Her mother hadn't made it onto the boat. The crowd had been too thick, the soldiers too close. Marisol had been pushed forward, separated, swallowed by the mass of bodies, all desperate for the same impossible dream. "I'll find you," her mother had shouted. "I'll come on the next boat." There was no next boat, not for her mother. The exodus ended 3 days later. 125,000 Cubans made it to Florida. Marisol's mother died in Havana 18 years later, never having seen her daughter again.
But Marisol survived. She arrived in Miami with no money, no English, no family, no skills, except the ability to work until her body gave out, and then work some more. Her first job was cleaning rooms at a Holiday Inn near the airport. Minimum wage, no benefits. A manager who called her the Cuban girl because he couldn't be bothered to learn her name. She cleaned toilets, she scrubbed floors. She smiled at guests who looked through her like she was furniture. And every night, she went home to a shared apartment with 5 other women and dreamed of something better. It took 12 years to save enough for her first hotel, a small place in Key West, 14 rooms, a leaking roof, and a sign that said, Marisol's Inn. Tomas was born the same year. She ran the hotel with a baby on her hip and a fire in her chest that refused to go out.
The first hotel almost killed her. Not literally, but close enough. Marisol's Inn opened in April 1992. By June, she was 3 months behind on the mortgage, the air conditioning had died, and a hurricane was heading straight for the Florida Keys. Her husband, Carlos, had wanted to sell, cut their losses. "We tried," he said. "No shame in that." "I didn't come to this country to try." Marisol had been standing at the front desk, watching the plywood go up on the windows. "I came to build something." "Marisol, we have a son. We can't risk everything on a 14-room hotel." "Then don't risk it. Go. Take Tomas somewhere safe. I'll stay." "You can't stay. There's a hurricane coming." "I know." She'd picked up a hammer. "Help me with the windows or get out of my way." Carlos stayed. Of course he did. He was stubborn, but he loved her more than he loved being right. The hurricane hit that night, Category 2. They huddled in the basement with 3 guests who'd refused to evacuate and a case of canned beans. By morning, the roof was damaged but intact. The sign had blown away. Half the windows were shattered, but the building stood. Marisol walked outside into the aftermath, debris everywhere, palm trees bent like broken fingers, and she started cleaning up before the sun was fully risen. A neighbor drove by. "You should sell, before it gets worse." Marisol didn't answer. She just kept working. Carlos died in 2019. Heart attack, sudden and cruel. But by then, they had 11 hotels and a son who'd graduated from Cornell. Now she owned 18, and Glenn Hartley had no idea. Day 3 brought something worse than theft. Marisol was restocking her cart on the 4th floor when she heard voices from room 418. The door was propped open. Maintenance issue, according to the work log. Glenn's voice, and someone crying. She moved closer, pretending to organize her supplies. "Come on, Carmen, don't be like that." Glenn's tone was soft, gentle almost, but underneath it was something rotten. "I'm just saying you're pretty. Is that a crime?" "Please, Mr. Hartley, I need to finish my rooms." "Your rooms can wait. I'm your boss. I decide when you're done." A pause. "You know, your review is coming up. I'd hate for there to be any problems."
Marisol's hands tightened on her cart. "Please, I have kids. I can't lose this job. Then be nice to me. That's all I'm asking."
Footsteps in the hallway. Yolanda appeared, saw Marisol frozen outside the door, and immediately understood. She didn't hesitate. "Mr. Hartley?" Yolanda knocked on the doorframe, loud. "Sorry to interrupt. There's a situation at the front desk. They need you." Silence. Then Glenn emerged, smoothing his tie. "What situation?" "Guest complaint. VIP. They asked for the manager specifically." Glenn glanced back into the room, then at Yolanda. Something passed between them. A warning. "We'll continue this later, Carmen." He walked away without another word. Carmen came out a moment later, eyes red, hands shaking. She was maybe 22, young enough to be Marisol's granddaughter. "Thank you," Carmen whispered to Yolanda. Then she hurried away. Yolanda turned to Marisol. "You didn't see anything." "I saw everything." "Then forget it, unless you want to be next." Day 4, Marisol found the paper trail. She'd been assigned to clean the administrative offices, a punishment, according to Glenn. But Marisol didn't mind. Offices had desks. Desks had files. The housekeeping budget report was sitting on Dana Prescott's desk. Marisol photographed it with the cheap phone she'd bought for this assignment. The numbers didn't match. According to the report, housekeeping received $4,200 per month in guest tips, distributed equally among staff. But based on what the women actually received, the total was closer to $2,100. Half the money was missing, every month, for at least 3 years. $67,000. Gone. She photographed the HR files too. Performance reviews, termination letters, 19 women in 3 years. All fired for performance issues. All had filed complaints about Glenn first. Dana Prescott signed every letter. She knew. She was part of it.
That evening, Marisol heard about the trap. Rosa told her in the break room, voice barely above a whisper. "They're writing up Yolanda. 3 complaints in one file. Guests said she was rude. Another said she didn't clean properly. A third said she stole from the minibar. Yolanda doesn't steal. Of course she doesn't, but the complaints are in the system now. That's all they need. 3 write-ups. Termination. Marisol found Yolanda in the supply closet, crying. "They're going to fire me." Yolanda wiped her eyes. "Glenn told me this morning. He said I have until Friday to improve my attitude, or I'm done. The complaints are fake. I know they're fake, but how do I prove it?" She laughed bitterly. "I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have just let him do whatever he wanted to Carmen." "No," Marisol took her hand. "You did the right thing." "The right thing is going to cost me my job. I have student loans. My mother is sick. I can't afford to be unemployed." Yolanda pulled away. "I'm sorry, Maria. I shouldn't burden you with this. You're not a burden. You should stay away from me. Glenn knows we're friends." "Who are you, Maria?" Marisol almost told her. "Almost. Just someone who's been where you are," she said instead. "Trust me, this isn't over. One more day." That's all she needed.
Day 5, the lobby, the moment that would end Glenn Hartley's career. Marisol had been cleaning the large windows overlooking the harbor. Routine work, invisible work. Until Glenn noticed. "What the hell are you doing?" He crossed the lobby in 5 long strides, face red, voice carrying to every corner. "Cleaning the windows, like you asked." "I asked you to clean them before the guests arrive, not during." Glenn grabbed the spray bottle from her hand. "You're making us look bad. You're making me look bad." The family with children stopped near the elevator. The businessman at the front desk turned to watch. Glenn leaned in close. "Go back to your country. We don't need people like you here." Loud enough for everyone to hear. Loud enough for phones to come out. Loud enough to seal his fate.
Marisol looked at Glenn Hartley, really looked at him. Saw the small man hiding behind the big title, the bully who'd never faced consequences. "Are you finished?" she asked quietly. "I'm finished when I say I'm finished. Now get out of my sight before I fire you right here." "Okay," Marisol set down her rag. "I think I will." She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. Glenn laughed. "That's right, run. That's all people like you know how to do." The elevator doors opened. Marisol stepped inside, pulled out her phone, and made one call. "Tomas, bring the lawyers. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She hung up. Glenn was still laughing when the doors closed. He wouldn't be laughing tomorrow.
The next morning, Glenn Hartley was in an excellent mood. He'd finally gotten rid of the old Mexican woman. She'd quit, just like they always did. At 8:45 a.m., he gathered the housekeeping staff for the daily meeting. "Good news, ladies. María Santos is no longer with us. Apparently, the work was too hard for her." He smiled. "Which means we're short-staffed, which means you all need to pick up the slack." Groans from the group. Yolanda stared at the floor. "Now, before we get started, there's a mandatory all-staff meeting in the ballroom at 9. Corporate wants to talk about some policy changes. Probably more diversity training nonsense." At 8:58, the housekeeping department filed into the ballroom. They joined the front desk staff, the maintenance crew, the restaurant workers, nearly 100 employees in total. Glenn took a seat in the front row.
At exactly 9 o'clock, the ballroom doors opened. Tomas Echevarria walked in first, tall, well-dressed, carrying a folder thick with documents. Behind him, 2 women in suits, lawyers. And behind them, walking slowly, wearing a simple black dress instead of a housekeeping uniform, was Marisol Echevarria. Glenn's smile faded. Dana Prescott's phone clattered to the floor. "Good morning, everyone." Tomas stepped up to the podium. "For those who don't know me, I'm Tomas Echevarria, CEO of Echevarria Hospitality Group." He paused. "This is my mother, Marisol Echevarria, the founder of this company, and for the past 5 days, she's been working here as a housekeeper." The room erupted in whispers. Glenn Hartley sat frozen in his chair. His face went from red to white in 3 seconds.
Marisol walked to the podium. She didn't rush. "5 days ago, I walked into this hotel as María Santos." Her voice carried to every corner of the room. "I wanted to see how my employees were being treated. What I found was worse than I imagined." She looked directly at Glenn. "Mr. Hartley, please stand." He didn't move. "Stand up." Slowly, Glenn rose. His legs seemed uncertain. "In 5 days, I watched you steal tips from workers who depend on that money to feed their families. I watched you fabricate complaints to fire employees who stood up to you. I watched you corner a young woman behind closed doors." Carmen, somewhere in the crowd, began to cry. "And yesterday, in front of guests and colleagues, you told me to go back to my country."
Glenn opened his mouth. "Mrs. Echevarria, I didn't know." "Exactly," she cut him off. "You didn't know who I was. That is the point. You treated me that way because you thought I was powerless, because you thought no one important was watching." She stepped closer to him. "I was watching. I was always watching." Glenn's face crumbled. "Please, I have a family. You should have thought about that before you made 22 women's lives miserable." Marisol turned to the lawyers. "Read the findings." The lawyer opened her folder. "Glenn Hartley has systematically stolen approximately $67,000 in employee tips over the past 3 years. He has fabricated complaints to terminate 19 employees who filed grievances against him. And he has created a hostile work environment through verbal abuse and intimidation.
The lawyer continued. Dana Prescott, as HR manager, was complicit in these actions. She falsified documentation, buried complaints, and participated in the wrongful termination of multiple employees. Dana stood up. "This is ridiculous. I was just doing my job. Glenn told me." "Glenn told you to break the law." Marisol's voice was ice. "And you did." Eagerly. She turned back to the room. "Mr. Hartley and Miss Prescott are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort them from the building. They will not receive severance. They will not receive references." Glenn stumbled forward. "You can't do this. I'll sue. I'll—" "Sue me?" Marisol almost smiled. "Please, I have lawyers you can't afford to look at." 2 security guards appeared at the door. Glenn looked at them, then at Marisol, then the 100 employees watching his destruction. He had nothing left to say.
The aftermath was swift. The company settled with the 19 wrongfully terminated employees. Full back pay plus damages, $1.2 million total. Every current employee received their stolen tips, calculated from the falsified records. Some received checks for over $3,000. Carmen filed a formal complaint about Glenn's behavior. 3 other women came forward with similar stories. The documentation was forwarded to the State Labor Board. Glenn Hartley never worked in hospitality again. His name became synonymous with the viral video that circulated for weeks. 38 million views. The man who told his boss to go back to her country. Last anyone heard, he'd moved to another state, started over in a different industry. Not as a manager, just a worker, like everyone else. Sometimes that's how the story ends. Not with prison, just with consequences. Yolanda Fonseca was promoted to general manager of the Harbor Inn. She cried when Marisol told her. Real tears, the kind that come from years of holding everything inside. "I don't know if I can do this," Yolanda said. "I was a housekeeper. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience." "I was a housekeeper too," Marisol took her hand, "for 12 years. And then I built 18 hotels. A degree doesn't teach you how to treat people with dignity. You already know that." "But the other managers?" "Will learn from you, or they'll leave." Marisol squeezed her hand. "You stood up for Carmen when it could have cost you everything. You welcomed me when everyone else looked away. That is what leadership looks like." Yolanda wiped her eyes. "My mother won't believe this." "Then let's call her together."
1 year later, Marisol Echevarria sat on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sun rise over the harbor. The Harbor Inn had the highest employee satisfaction rating in the company now. Turnover was down 60%. Guest reviews mentioned the staff by name, praising their warmth, their care, their dignity. Yolanda had done that. A housekeeper who became a general manager. An immigrant's daughter who refused to be invisible. Marisol thought about her mother sometimes, the woman who never made it onto that boat, who died in Havana without ever seeing what her daughter built. She would have been proud. Confused, probably, but proud. The phone buzzed, a text from Tomas. Board approved the scholarship fund. First recipients start next fall. We're calling it the María Santos program. Marisol smiled. Some empires start with nothing. A boat, a dream, a willingness to clean toilets until something better comes along. The best ones remember where they came from, and they make sure others don't have to struggle alone. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Every week, we share stories about dignity, resilience, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to be invisible. Leave a comment below. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up for what's right, even when it costs them everything? And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, share it with them. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.